Hello, and welcome back to my Making a Beauxbatons costume. In this week's episode, I made this dress. Yay! And if you want to see how I made that dress, video. So the first thing you want to do is get out all your bodice pieces and pin them to your fabric and then cut them out. Then I'm applying some interfacing along the centre front where I will eventually place buttons. Then I sew all the bodice pieces together. Using an iron on a low setting due to synthetic fabrics, I then press all the seams flat. And pin, cut and repeat for the collar pieces. I then sew along the pinned edge of the fabric. Once that's done, I then clip away the excess fabric so it'll be easier to turn in the right way. I then baste along the open edge of the collar, and then I baste the collar to the bodice. Next, it's time to cut out the sleeves. After the sleeves are cut out, I sew 2 lines of gathering stitches along the top edge and gather them. Using my overlocker, I finish the edges of the sleeves. As the sleeves are not lined, this will stop the fabric from fraying. I sew the inside seam of the sleeve together before I then decide on which of the placket finishes I want to use. This one! I cut some bias strips from some pieces of scrap fabric, which I will use as part of the placket. I mark where it's going to go, and then I sew it all in place. I carefully cut in between where I sewed, and then I iron it over onto the wrong side to make the placket opening. As you can see, this part was incredibly fiddly, and so I really had to be patient with it. I then pin it all in place and begin to hand stitch it down so that you won't see the stitches on the other side when it's turned around. Iron the inside seam nice and flat, and now we're ready to make the cuffs. Now I really enjoyed making these cuffs because they're a double cuff, which isn't something you normally see on your everyday clothing. The cuffs are made in almost the same way as the collar. You apply interfacing to them, and then you sew along one edge, leaving the other edge open. Once again, trimming away any of the excess fabric so that it makes it easier when we go to turn it in the right way. And repeat these steps for the second cuff. Once you have 2 beautiful pairs of cuffs, pin them together and then baste them in place. pin to the sleeve and then sew them in place. I turn over the inside edge and then I hand sew it in place. And here we are cutting out even more pattern pieces. We're almost at the end, I promise. For the skirt pieces, I decided to sew them together using a French seam. That basically means you sew them together first, wrong sides together, and then you trim that piece that you've sewn, you flip it and iron it, and then you sew the piece you've just ironed to create a nice seam. And then we attach the skirts to the bodice finally. Remember everything we've done so far in making this costume? Oh good, because we're about to repeat every single step of it, but in a darker blue. So I'm using the same fabric again, but this time I'm lining the costume with it. Here I am attaching the lining to the bodice at the collar point. I make sure to clip the corners so that when I turn them out the right way and iron them, they will be nice and crisp. I then sew down about 2/3 of the front opening. Because this is a false opening and these buttons aren't functional, this will help it keep its place. Next I add 4 buttons, and under the top 2 buttons I add 2 snaps so that I can open the shirt and actually get it over my head. Next I cut out the skirt lining, and using the same French seam method as I did as the fashion skirt fabric, I sew together the skirt lining. I then sew the skirt lining in place along the inside of the dress. Then it's time to install the invisible zip. Now I changed the zipper placement from the back of the dress to under the arm because personally I just think it looks better and it's much more hidden under the arm. I used 2 sets of hook and eyes on each of the cuffs to keep them closed. Here I am trying to show you how the hook and eyes work, and I'm definitely not struggling to do it. The last thing left to do on the dress is to hem the skirts. For the lining skirt, I went with a rolled hem. And for the outer skirt, I decided to try hem tape for the very first time. This meant I just marked what size hem I wanted all the way around, and then ironed that over, and then inserted hem tape and re-ironed it. The hem tape fuses together and creates an invisible hemline. Guys, I did it. I mean, it took me a few months, but I've done it. It's finished. Do you want to see it? Let's go. there you go. That's how I made my final version of a Beauxbatons uniform from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Except this isn't going to be my final version. One of the reasons I am going to look at making this again is the fabric choice. I originally made this one out of a sand-wash satin, which is a polyester, because I couldn't find anywhere locally in New Zealand that had a reasonably priced crepe silk fabric. I have, however, of this morning, found a local supplier that is within my budget, so I will be making it from silk next. I am extremely happy with how the patterning went on this one. As far as I'm concerned, it is completely and utterly film accurate. The only thing I did differently though is change the zipper placement from the back of the dress to under the arm. Once again, personal preference, thought the back was ugly, under the arm, hidden, smooth, love it. Another change I will be doing on my next version is making sure that the hems of the skirts are the same. So for the underskirt, I did a rolled hem, and for the overskirt, I did an invisible hem using invisible hem tape. I will be doing invisible hem on both of the skirts on the next version because it's got such a nicer finish. I have a playlist containing all of the other videos I've made on the construction of this garment. I also have a breakdown of the Beauxbatons uniform on my website, which you can find in the link below. And that's all I have to say about that. Until next time, bye!